Hello, and welcome to this week's Fireside Chat. I am Peter Bonilla, Fire's Vice President of Programs, and with me today are my colleagues Daniel Burnett, Zach Greenberg, and Brynne Madway. Brynne, I want to start this week's Fireside Chat with you as I did last week, because this week we have another lawsuit to be talking about, this time against Joliet Junior College in Illinois on behalf of a student named Yvette Salazar. Yvette was distributing anti-capitalism flyers on her campus and was shut down and actually detained by police. And I'm not even coming close to capturing the full color of that case. So can you first, before we get to the lawsuit itself, tell us what happened there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you recapped it pretty accurately and quickly. I mean, what happened was on November 28th, our student saw members of a conservative group distributing anti-socialist materials on campus. And so she decided she wanted to present an alternate viewpoint. And so she distributed her flyers from the Party for Socialism and Liberation that read "Shut Down Capitalism." And after being reported by campus staff, she was detained by the campus police for approximately 40 minutes, interrogated at the campus police station, and told she couldn't distribute her flyers because of the political climate of the country. So, I mean, I think this is a really stark example of what can happen.
And now with Fire's help, she has sued the college. Can you talk a little bit about the lawsuit itself and what we are hoping to get from it and what we are charging the college with?
Yes. So I think this is another example of a relatively straightforward suit that would be easy for a non-lawyer to read and understand. I mean, we are alleging in it that the school's treatment of her and application of its policies violated her First Amendment rights. So we challenge a number of school policies as they were applied to her, and then we challenge some of the other school policies and just argue that the policies as written are unconstitutional. So for example, this is a school that has one free speech zone that's inside. So all of those open outdoor areas of campus, the rest of the buildings aren't open to student expressive activity. There's also a posting policy that regulates the types of flyers that students can post. And I mean, this is an example of a school where you need to get permission from administrators before you can speak anywhere on campus. So you can't react to events as they're occurring. You need to wait until that administrator gives you permission. And so this is a good example of the type of case where we're really hoping to bring about significant policy reforms so students are free to express themselves on campus, outside, in other areas inside, and then not need to seek permission before doing it.
Okay, and this is yet another lawsuit going after, among other things, a free speech zone on a college campus. These free speech zones, unfortunately, are not uncommon on college campuses, but at this point, neither are lawsuits going after free speech zones. Multiple colleges have been sued over these policies, and multiple colleges have lost or settled these same suits, including a number settling suits brought by Fire or brought with Fire's assistance. Why? The record is pretty clear that these sorts of small, very restrictive, very bureaucratically laden free speech zones are unconstitutional. So why do you think that we keep arriving at this point? Why does this keep happening at colleges around the country?
I can't answer that question because I'm not a college administrator. And free speech zones don't make much sense to me. They seem to be more about the convenience of the administrators than about protecting students. I mean, I think what we see at schools that don't have free speech zones is students able to express themselves and, and we don't see problems. I'm thinking of schools where we've written letters and the school has changed its policies and we don't hear about problems coming back later. I mean, I think it's so clear that students have the right to speak on campus and they shouldn't be confined to tiny little boxes.
Now, what we talk about these often at Fire. A free speech zone, falls under the umbrella of what you would call a time, place, and manner policy. And time, place, and manner policies are a common feature not just of colleges but of the public arena in general. This kind of free speech zone is obviously one that goes much too far in the kind of restrictions it imposes. And from having worked many years with FIRE's individual rights defense program, I've seen a lot of colleges when faced with criticisms over their free speech zone, just say kind of time, place, manner, time, place, manner, time, place, manner, as if just saying that over and over again sort of solves the problem and should ward off criticism. What's the, and I'll kind of open it up to everyone here, Zach as an attorney, you as well. What's the line that they have to stay on the right side of when we go from a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction to something that crosses over the line into unconstitutionally restricting the right to free expression?
Zach, if you want, I'll let you start.
No, you can take this one.
Okay, so I think what we see here is when you're restricting it to a tiny little area of campus, what you're not leaving open are alternative channels of communication. What you're not doing is you don't have a narrowly tailored policy. So the policy itself isn't really tailored to any legitimate need of campus. And so I think if you're just repeating these words from a Supreme Court case, time, place, and manner, you're not getting to what the Supreme Court is really intending, which is a restriction that is narrowly tailored to the needs and leaves open alternative channels of communication. So I think of other lawsuits and other cases where, students should be able to go around their campus, have these political discussions. They shouldn't be, and there are other ways to create these restrictions. So you could have a rule that didn't let students block doors so everyone could still go to class. You could have restrictions on amplified noise so you could prevent students from getting on a bullhorn and disrupting every single class at the community college. But simply having a rule that you have to be restricted to a tiny little area, other places we've seen the size of a couple parking spots, is just not reasonable.
That's a great point. I think the big issue here, the big word is reasonable. It has to be reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. And courts have said that the entirety of these open outdoor areas of campus are areas where you can express yourself. You can have your full free speech First Amendment rights. So the notion that colleges can restrict the free speech right to their students to this tiny, less than 0.1% of the entire campus is not very reasonable at all. So just like saying their time, place, and manner restrictions doesn't give the university a free pass to restrict speech to these tiny areas.
And this one is particularly important, I think, because only 2 people can use it at one time. So for a school of 15,000, that's just ridiculous. And there are other things too, like you have to stay behind a desk, and it's very restrictive what they're doing here.
Right, and I think that none of this really serves any purpose other than making it easy for administrators, and that's not the First Amendment. The First Amendment gives students the right to express themselves on campus.
All right. Great. Well, thanks very much, especially you, Brynne. I've leaned heavily on you the first part of this chat. I'll just say, lastly, that this suit was brought as part of FIRE's Million Voices campaign, in which we hope through litigation to free 1 million student voices from unconstitutional censorship on their campuses. If you're interested in learning more about it, go to our website, thefire.org. I'm going to move it on, and now I'm going to move it over to you, Zach, because this week you've had a piece in the Chronicle of Higher Education criticizing the abuses of FERPA on college campuses. Could you talk to us a little bit about your criticisms, and first of all, maybe tell our viewers what FERPA is.
I'd be happy to. So FERPA is Higher Education Student Privacy Law. It stands for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And what it generally does is it prevents institutions receiving federal money, pretty much all of them, educational institutions, from having a policy of disclosing the educational records of their students. It was passed in the wake of the Watergate scandal out of the fear that the government and schools were holding these secret private documents of students that could be harmfully disclosed. And the issue with FERPA is that it's a privacy statute that doesn't protect privacy. It's a rights statute that creates no enforceable rights, and it's an access statute that allows universities to conceal newsworthy information about their school. For example, we've seen universities invoke FERPA wrongfully to prevent the release of information regarding crime statistics, regarding violent crime on their campuses, regarding athletic scandals and other administrative scandals. And this is an issue because it's supposed to be a statute that protects student rights and student privacy, not an excuse for universities to stonewall attempts by journalists and other news organizations to learn more about their institutions.
Now, if I'm correct, sort of the interpretations and abuses of FERPA sort of hinge on the definition of what constitutes an educational record. And my sense is, according to the law, according to the law's original intent, the definition of an educational record under FERPA is fairly clearly, fairly narrowly defined, and universities have sort of expanded it to include just kind of anything that even remotely touches on a student at a university.
Yeah, and the key point is it affects students. It's about student educational records, which is a problem for many universities because what they do is they use FERPA to cover up information regarding administrators, regarding faculty members. For one case was a university was giving preferential admissions treatment to very underqualified applicants, people that had clout, that knew people were getting into this university despite not being academically qualified. And the university cited FERPA to prevent the release of information amongst administrators about the scandal. And this is very common for athletic scandals. One university used it to cover up parking tickets, cover up legal settlements. Even one university used it to try to get a restraining order on a student newspaper to prevent the release of information regarding administrative malfeasance and negligence. So you're right, the purpose of this statute is to protect student rights, not protect administrative malfeasance and negligence.
And another major part of the problem, in addition to the expansive definition of an educational record universities have taken, is that there's pretty much there's no consequence at all if universities ignore FERPA. So there's no incentive for them to really follow it faithfully. Is that accurate, you would say?
Yeah, that's very accurate. The Supreme Court has stated that despite the statute having rights in its name, that does not create enforceable rights, so individuals cannot sue to enforce FERPA. And the federal government, they're in a bit of a difficult spot here because they have the authority under the statute to take away all of a school's federal funding, which is a pretty draconian measure. It's a death penalty for many schools, taking away all their federal funding. But they can either do that or nothing at all, which naturally many schools have, many FERPA violators have gone in the way with impunity because the federal government won't enforce this remedy. So since individuals can enforce it, and since the federal government under the Department of Education won't enforce it, it's gone without enforcement for decades now.
Now, FERPA is something that you have been thinking a lot about recently because you focused a lot of your legal research on FERPA this year. In fact, you and your colleague Adam Goldstein have a law review article out in, I have the name of it here, the Notre Dame Journal of Legislation, where you talk at more length about these abuses and outline some solutions to the problem and give universities some suggestions to find our way out of this mess. Could you talk a little bit more about the focus of the article and what some of those practical solutions might be?
Yeah, sure. The main abuses they cut both ways. The first kind of abuse is how universities cite FERPA wrongfully to prevent disclosure of newsworthy records via open records request, via their students requesting information about their school. And the other abuse is that they're simply violating FERPA's provisions. They're disclosing records by students that are private information, personal information that FERPA explicitly says they cannot disclose. So some of our solutions to this problem are giving individuals and the federal government meaningful enforcement mechanisms, allowing them to fine schools, for example, for violating FERPA, allowing individuals to sue schools, to hold schools accountable for abusing FERPA. And that's one of our recommendations. We also want to harmonize FERPA with open record statutes, with the Clery Act, which requires schools to disclose crime statistics and other violent crime on their campus. And the point here, the overarching goal is to allow FERPA to be what it's meant to be, to protect student privacy and allow students and their parents access to their educational records.
Now that's that's an important point that you bring up, harmonizing it with existing open records laws, because when it comes to FERPA, when it comes to open records requests, I've seen, we have some experience with this ourselves at FIRE, as do a lot of newspapers, as do a lot of college publications, of getting stonewalled by their universities when they're trying to submit open records requests. Could you talk a little more about like the overall problem? I feel like it's I sense there's the FERPA issues, and then there's just an overall, seems like there's an overall culture of opacity, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, that's a good point. The overall culture of opacity, like you referenced, is this push, this drive by universities that when they're engulfed with scandal, when they're engulfed with potentially damaging information coming out regarding, say, students' death or regarding crime statistics, they're very loath to give newspapers and student journalists the benefit of the doubt when it comes to requesting information. They're very loath to actually give these media organizations the rightful information that they should do under state open records law, the universities that are bound by those laws, state universities. And the way we like to describe it is that FERPA is a gigantic rug that administrators tend to sweep all this information under. It's just a general excuse for stonewalling, which is really a shame because taxpayers pay for these universities, they pay for these state schools, and they have a right to know under these laws what they're doing with their money.
I always find it's so interesting and vaguely humorous. I'm thinking, primarily of you, Daniel, as the representative from our communications office, someone, sort of responsible in part for the sort of the outward-looking face of FIRE. Why universities, are so willing to risk the bad PR of stonewalling? I guess. Because that's worse than the potentially even worse PR if they have to be transparent. What do you, what do we think about that in terms of that overall PR mindset?
Well, I'm glad they're willing to risk it, because I think sometimes it makes our cases more interesting. When you can go in and find some of that information, we're able to use the media to really pressure them to put out some of this information.
Yeah. How are we? I'm breaking the fourth wall entirely. I have no idea how we are on time here. Oh, do we? Okay. Well then, gosh, I wasn't used to this. Last time I ran exactly on time to the second, and I just sort of figured I would be able to make that lightning strike twice. Okay, we've got a little bit of time left. Time enough for me to point out that's not coffee in Zach's mug right there. That's water. He just wanted to have a New England Patriots mug on camera.
Go Pats.
It's gratuitous, and I'm calling you out on that, Zach.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate this, but at FIRE we have the freedom to disagree in our sports teams, regardless of how terrible and awful they may be.
Disagree.
That's fair. That's fair.
Well, with that, I'm going to bring this week's Fireside Chat to a close. Again, I want to thank my colleagues. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Brynne, for the context that you've provided on what's going on at FIRE. As you can see, with news especially of this most recent lawsuit at Joliet Junior College. It's busy times at FIRE, busy times for free speech, and we're very interested for any students, any faculty that are worried about censorship on their campuses. Give us a call, send us an email, fire@thefire.org. We're very happy to talk, and we're very happy to hopefully help liberate your voice from censorship at your college. So with that, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.